There are more than 30 brands of zero-turn mowers sitting on dealer lots and store floors in this country right now, and by the time we're done here, I'm going to name the 4 I think are actually worth your money, show you the 4 things underneath the paint that decide it, and hand you a way to price any machine so nobody can ever sell you the wrong one again. Not a ranking based on how the seat feels. 4 specific pieces of hardware, and what they cost when they let go. I've had more of these apart than I've owned, which is the only kind of experience that teaches you anything useful about them. And here's the thing that started this whole line of thinking for me. 2 mowers, same lot, one with a badge people trust and one nobody's heard of. And underneath they had the identical drive unit, the identical stamped deck, and about $1,100 of difference in the price tag. Neither one of them was going to last the guy buying it more than 4 or 5 seasons of real work. Both of them had the word commercial printed somewhere on the machine. That word is the whole problem. Hold on to it, because at the end of this, I'm going to show you exactly what it legally means in the mower business. And the answer is going to annoy you. 3 things I'm flagging now so you know they're coming. Brand number 3 on my list sells what is essentially the same machine under 2 completely different names, in 2 different colors, at 2 different prices, in 2 different stores, and the guy at the counter is not going to volunteer that. Brand number 4 invented the hydrostatic zero-turn back in 1964 and was recently bought for $375 million in cash by a company you probably associate with cordless drills. And somewhere past the halfway mark, I'm going to read you a line off an actual retail listing for a mower, where the manufacturer manages to call the same machine residential and commercial in the space of about 11 words. Let's get into it. First, the map, because almost nobody buying one of these knows who they're actually buying from. Exmark has been owned by Toro since 1997. Toro also bought Spartan's parent company, the Intimidator Group out of Batesville, Arkansas, in January of 2022 for $400 million. A business doing roughly $200 million a year in sales at the time. Gravely has belonged to Ariens since 1982. Hustler's parent, Excel Industries of Heston, Kansas, was bought by Stanley Black & Decker for $375 million in cash, the same buying spree that swallowed MTD, which is Cub Cadet and Troy built, with the 2 deals together running about $1.9 billion. Ferris, Snapper Pro, and Simplicity all sit under Briggs & Stratton, which filed Chapter 11 in July of 2020 and was bought out of bankruptcy by a private equity outfit that September. Scag is owned by Metalcraft of Mayville in Wisconsin and has been the whole time. So when somebody tells you they'd never buy anything but a certain brand, understand that in most cases they're expressing loyalty to a paint code owned by a holding company. That's the comparison running under everything I'm about to say. Not which badge, but which parts. And who still has a reason to put good ones in. Now the 4 things under the paint. Stay with me through this stretch, because everything after it is just applying it. And if you skip it, the brand list is going to sound like opinion. Number 1 is the drive. A zero-turn doesn't have a transmission in the way you're picturing. Each rear wheel is driven by its own hydraulic circuit, a pump that varies how much oil it shoves, feeding a motor that turns the wheel. Push the lever, the pump swash plate tilts. More oil goes out. That wheel speeds up. Pull one lever back and that wheel runs backward while the other runs forward and the machine spins on its own axis. There are no gears to shift, which is exactly why anybody can drive one after 4 minutes of practice. The overwhelming majority of these units, across nearly every brand, come from one supplier, Hydrogear. And their part numbers are the single most honest thing on any mower spec sheet, because unlike the marketing copy, they're not negotiable. The EZT 2200 is the entry unit, sealed, no filter, nothing you can service, built around a 10cc pump and a 10cc motor, and intended for a homeowner mowing once or twice a week. Step up and you get the ZT 2800, which pairs that same 10cc pump with a 16cc motor, has real oil capacity, better cooling, larger bearings, and, this is the part that matters, can actually have its fluid and filter changed. Above that sit the 3100 and 3200, and above those the 3400 and 5400, which the guys who run these for a living tend to consider the genuinely commercial units. At the very top, you leave integrated transaxles behind entirely and go to separate pumps and wheel motors with hard lines, which is expensive and is why you only see it on flagship machines. Here's why I lead with this. When one of these lets go, you are not fixing it in the driveway. Transmission replacement on a zero-turn runs somewhere in the neighborhood of $1,600 to $3,000 once it's done. On a machine that cost you $5,000, that is the end of the machine. So the drive unit isn't a feature. It's the expiration date printed in a part number, and the salesman is under no obligation to translate it. Number 2 is the deck. Stamped means the deck shell was pressed out of sheet steel in one shot, curves and all. Fabricated means somebody cut flat plate, formed it, and welded it together, usually 7 gauge, sometimes with extra plate reinforcing the leading edge and the spindle mounts. A stamped deck can cut beautifully. The pressing process actually lets you build in aerodynamic shapes that are hard to weld up. What it can't do is take a decade of curbs, roots, hidden stumps, and pressure washing. Fabricated decks get straightened and rewelded. Stamped decks get replaced. Number 3, and this is the one hardly anybody looks at, the spindles. Every blade rides on a shaft in a housing with 2 bearings, spinning around 3,000 RPM, 6 inches off the dirt in a cloud of wet grass and grit. The leading cause of spindle death isn't load, it's contamination. Water and grit getting past the seals. The good ones are ductile iron rather than aluminum or gray iron, because ductile iron takes a curb strike and deforms instead of cracking. The really well thought out ones stack multiple seals, isolate the upper bearing grease from the lower so the top one doesn't run dry as grease settles, and pack enough of it in from the factory that the assembly outlives the bearings. That costs money to build. Cheap spindles are aluminum housings with a couple of ordinary sealed bearings and a hope. And on the endless grease-fitting argument, I'll be honest, I don't think it's the deciding factor. I've seen greasable spindles die inside one season, and sealed ones go past 1,000 hours in commercial service. What kills them either way is water. If you take one thing from this section, stop pressure washing your deck. You're driving water straight past the seals from below. Number 4 is the engine, and specifically the letters, not the number. Take Kawasaki, since everybody trusts the name. The FR series is designed for residential zero turns and lawn tractors, and uses a single-stage air filter. The FX series is the professional line, with a multi-stage canister filter. Now, same displacement in the popular sizes, 726 cc, same bore and stroke. And I've seen experienced people argue the long block is essentially common between them with a cosmetically different crankcase. I can't confirm that from anything I'd call a primary source, so I'll say what I actually believe. The filtration difference alone is enough to matter on a machine with the engine hanging out in the open eating dust all day. And the duty rating the manufacturer assigns is the manufacturer telling you what they expect. Guys running FX engines commercially report replacing them somewhere in the 1,500 to 1,800 hour range. That's a real number to plan around. 4 things. Drive unit part number, deck construction, spindle material, engine series. Now the brands. Number 1, Scag. Metalcraft of Mayville, still independent, still Wisconsin, and the brand that a huge number of owner-operators will simply not deviate from. I want to be specific about why, because they're built tough is not an argument. Scag builds its own decks and has done for decades, and the fabricated deck on their commercial machines is the reference point everybody else gets measured against. That's not brand romance. That's what the competing engineers benchmark. Their flagship, the Turf Tiger 2, has been in continuous development since 1997, and current MSRP on the models most people configure runs roughly $17,000 to $20,500, depending on deck and engine. That is a lot of money, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise. What you're buying at that number is a machine designed on the assumption that it will be mowed with every working day for a decade and rebuilt rather than replaced. But the reason Scag is number one on my list isn't the flagship. It's that they carry the same construction philosophy down into machines a homeowner can actually justify. The Liberty Z runs a fabricated deck at a price that in current dealer listings sits in the neighborhood of $5,000 for a 36-inch machine and a bit over $5,000 for a 42. The Freedom Z, one step up, has been listing this year around $6,700 cash for a 48. Those machines run the ZT 2800 class transaxle. Serviceable, filtered, fluid you can change, under a welded deck, at a price where most of the industry is still handing you a sealed unit and a stamped shell. Now the caveat, and it's a real one. Scag charges for that. Compare a Scag against a big box machine of the same deck width, and you will be looking at $1,500 to $2,000 more. And if you mow an acre once a week for 25 hours a season, you will very likely be dead before that machine is, and the extra money will have bought you nothing but the pleasure of owning it. Scag makes sense when you have real acreage, real terrain, or you intend to keep the thing for 20 years. It does not make sense for a flat half acre. That's the expensive answer. The second brand is the one that made the whole category what it is, and it's the one I'd argue is the most overbought machine in America. Number 2, Exmark. In 1995, Exmark launched the Laser Z, the first commercial mid-mount zero-turn that lawn contractors adopted en masse, and essentially every mid-mount machine built since is downstream of it. Toro bought them 2 years later. Today, the Laser Z is still, by most accounts, the best-selling commercial zero-turn in American landscaping, and the X series starts around $16,700 cash, with a 72-inch build listed near $19,900. Why is it on my list? Cut quality and parts availability. The UltraCut Deck series has a reputation among people who get paid by the finished result. Not by the hour, by the result, for leaving a cleaner, more consistent cut on cool season turf than almost anything else. And because they're the volume leader, every parts counter in the country can get you a spindle or a belt the same week. That is worth actual money when a broken machine costs you a day. And here's the part where I'm going to argue against the thing I just praised. If you are a homeowner, the Laser Z is not for you, and buying one is an act of romance, not judgment. Exmark's own lineup goes down through the Radius and the smaller Laser variants, and the sensible move is to buy the smallest Exmark that actually covers your ground. What you're paying for in the big machines is throughput. The ability to cut 50 properties a week without the deck loading up. You do not have 50 properties. So one brand for the guy who wants a machine to outlive him, one for the guy who gets paid for how the lawn looks. Which leaves the two most interesting cases. The brand that sells you the same mower twice under different names, and the brand that invented all of this and then got absorbed by a tool maker. Quick check, you're still with me. And that surprises me a little, because most people wanted a list of names in the first 90 seconds. If this has been worth your time so far, subscribing takes a second, and it's the only thing I ask for. Then let's get to number 3, which is the one where I think a lot of you are quietly leaving $200 or $300 on the counter for no reason at all. Number 3, Gravely. Founded on a patented motor plow back in 1916, bought by Ariens in 1982, and today the professional half of a company whose other half sells to homeowners. Their commercial lineup is genuinely good. Current dealer listings put the ProTurn 500 somewhere between $13,900 and about $17,500, and the ProTurn 600 between roughly $16,000 and $18,000. with real fabricated decks and commercial-grade drives underneath. But here's the loop I flagged at the top. For years, in the entry and mid-range zero-turn segment, the Ariens machine and the Gravely machine have been the same mower. Same factory, same frame, same deck, same engine options, and in some model years, the paint and decals were about the extent of it. The Ariens went to the big box stores, the Gravely went to dealers, and the Gravely carried a price premium of roughly $200. Now, I want to be precise because this is where these comparisons usually go wrong. I'm reporting owner accounts and one dealer's own description, not a company statement. And the two lineups have diverged over the years, model for model. You have to actually check the spec sheets rather than assume. But when the frame weight, the deck, the drive unit, and the engine all match, that is not a coincidence. And the $200 is not buying you steel. What it might be buying you is the dealer. And I mean that seriously. Buy the box store machine and you own the assembly, the setup, and the warranty argument. Buy through a dealer and you get a machine that was properly prepped, blades balanced, deck leveled, and a phone number of somebody who has a reason to answer it. There are dealers who are openly reluctant to service big box units, and I've never once thought that was unreasonable. So the procedure is straightforward. Find the two model numbers, put the spec sheets side by side, and if they genuinely match, decide whether your local dealer is worth $200 to you. Sometimes the honest answer is no. Where I live, it would be an easy yes. Which brings me to the brand that has the strongest claim of all four to actually inventing this machine. And the shortest section, because the story is simple. Number 4, Hustler. Excel Industries, Heston, Kansas, put the first hydrostatic zero-turn mower on the market in 1964. That's the whole category, starting there. 600 employees, around 1,400 independent dealers across the U.S. and Canada. And in 2021, they agreed to be acquired by Stanley Black and Decker for $375 million in cash. They earn their spot for two reasons. First, they build across the whole range without pretending. The residential Raptor line is honestly presented as what it is, and the Super Z sits at the top with a 60-inch build recently listing around $14,800, which undercuts the comparable Scag and Exmark by a meaningful margin. Second, they've historically been willing to spend money in the unglamorous places, hydraulic hardlines and pump specification, the stuff nobody photographs for a brochure. The reservation, and I'll say it plainly. I don't yet know what a large tool conglomerate does to a mower company over 10 years. Sometimes nothing. Sometimes the cost engineers arrive in year 4. Ask me again in 2030, so Scag, Exmark, Gravely, Hustler. Now the part everybody's typing about already. Who I left out and whether overcharging is fair. Ferris is the hardest omission, and I want to be straight that it's a coin flip. Their independent suspension is, by a wide margin, the best ride in the industry. And if your ground is rough that isn't comfort, it's the difference between mowing at 4 miles an hour and mowing at 8. The ISX 2200 runs about $14,800 to just under $16,000. If Ferris is your 5th or your 1st, I'm not going to argue. The only thing that keeps it off my list is that it sits under a company that went through bankruptcy in 2020 and now answers to a private equity owner. And I want another few years of parts availability before I put it in a list titled The Only 4. Toro I left off for a different reason. Toro builds genuinely good commercial iron. The Zeedmaster 2000 HDX has been listing this year in the 11,000 range, with a 7-gauge deck, which is a serious machine at a not serious price. But Toro also owns Exmark and Spartan and sells homeowner machines through every big box in the country, which means the badge tells you almost nothing about what you're getting. When one brand spans that range, you have to read the spec sheet anyway. And if you're reading the spec sheet, you don't need the brand. John Deere makes competent machines and unmatched dealer support in farm country. And if that's your world, buy the Deere and don't lose sleep. Husqvarna, Cub Cadet, Craftsman, Troy-Bilt, Bad Boy, Spartan, and the rest span everything from decent to disposable, model by model, and blanket statements about them are how people end up wrong. So is everyone else overcharging you? Not exactly, and I'd rather be accurate than punchy. The overcharge is not at the top of the market. Nobody is getting robbed buying a $20,000 Turf Tiger. That thing is made of what they say it's made of. The overcharge lives in the middle, the $5,000 to $7,000 machine with a stamped deck, aluminum-housed spindles, a sealed transaxle you cannot service, a residential series engine, and a word printed on the side. That word. Let's finish this properly. Here is a line from a live retail listing for a 42-inch zero-turn from a major manufacturer, sold at a national home improvement chain. In the bullet points, in this order, 3-year unlimited hour residential warranty. Then, I'm quoting the listing, residential zero-turn mower with PRO DNA commercial mower. Read that again. In one breath, they've told you it's residential, told you the warranty is residential, and told you it has commercial DNA. And you know what's remarkable? Not one word of that is illegal or even unusual, because in the mower business the word commercial has no durability meaning whatsoever. There is a standard. 2, actually. ANSI OPI B71.1 covers consumer turf care equipment, including zero turns, and B71.4 covers equipment intended for marketing as commercial turf care equipment and customarily used by hired operators. Real standards written by the industry's own institute, and they are safety specifications. Guards, shields, controls, hot surfaces. Neither one of them says a single thing about how many hours the machine has to survive. Nothing about bearing life, transaxle service intervals, deck gauge, spindle metallurgy. Not 1 hour. So, commercial grade on a price tag means precisely what the person printing it wants it to mean. It costs them nothing. It is free. But here's where they have to stop lying, and this is the part I want you to walk away with. The warranty document. That's where the company's lawyers meet the company's engineers, and the engineers win, because somebody has to write down a number the company is willing to pay for. Look at what happens to that number when a manufacturer is actually standing behind commercial use. One serious builder covers its commercial ride-ons for 4 years or 500 hours, whichever comes first, with unlimited hours during the first 2. Transaxles, 3 years. Belts, tires, blades, 90 days. And their entry models, the ones aimed at homeowners, get 3 years for consumer use and 90 days if you mow for money. 90 days. That's the same company being completely honest with you, in writing, about which of its machines will survive being worked. Meanwhile, that residential machine with PRO DNA gets 3 years and unlimited hours, which sounds more generous until you notice the word residential is doing all the work, and that using a residential mower commercially typically voids the coverage entirely. Nobody lied to you. That's what makes it good. They printed a word with no legal weight in letters 4 inches tall, and they printed the number that costs them real money in a document you didn't read. Both statements are true. Only one of them is information. So from here on, you do it backwards. Ignore the badge. Ignore the horsepower. Ignore the cup holder and the suspension seat and the color. Find the warranty page. Find the hour limit. And ask yourself one question. How many hours is this company willing to bet its own money on? Because whatever that number is, they've done the math you haven't, on failure rates you'll never see, and they've priced it. They know. And now so do you. Something I keep coming back to about machines like this. There's a version of buying where you research a brand, trust it, and hand over the money. And it's not stupid. It's just a bet on somebody else's integrity, holding steady across ownership changes and cost reviews and quarters, where the numbers came in soft. 20 years ago, that bet paid off pretty reliably. It pays off less reliably now, and not because anyone turned wicked, but because the deciding is done further away from the welding. What replaces it isn't cynicism. It's the ability to read 4 things off a page. And here's what I like about that skill. It's transferable and it's permanent. The man who can look at a drive unit part number and know what he's looking at can walk into any dealership in the country, in any category: mowers, pressure washers, generators, log splitters, and be about 80% right in 90 seconds. Nobody can take that off him, and no marketing department can get around it. It doesn't make you suspicious. It makes you calm. There's a real difference between the two, and you can feel it standing at a counter. All right, the practical part. Here's the procedure, and it works on any machine, any brand, any price. 1. Get the drive unit off the spec sheet by part number. Sealed and unserviceable means light duty, period, whatever the tag says. Serviceable with a filter is the real dividing line. 2. Deck. Stamped or fabricated, and what gauge. Ask what the leading edge is reinforced with. If they don't know, that tells you something too. 3. Spindles. Housing material and how many seals. If the answer is a shrug, assume aluminum. 4. Engine series letters, not the horsepower number. Residential line or professional line, and what the air filter is. Then run the arithmetic. Take the out-the-door price and divide it by the hours you honestly expect from the machine. And be conservative, because a neglected mower gives up somewhere around 500 to 800 hours, while a well-maintained one runs 1,500 to 2,500. Then add your consumables. A realistic annual maintenance spend on a working machine, blades, filters, oil, belts, grease, lands somewhere between about $1,200 and $1,900. And yes, that is more than most people budget. Now compare your dollars per hour against the cheaper machine's dollars per hour. Sometimes the expensive one wins outright. Sometimes it doesn't, and the honest answer is, buy the cheap one, keep the difference, and replace it in 6 years. And figure out your own hours before you walk in. Half an acre of flat lawn, mowed weekly, is around 25 to 30 hours a season. Anybody selling you a commercial machine for that is selling you jewelry, and I say that as somebody who owns some jewelry. Here's what all this is really for. 6 or 7 years from now, on a Saturday in August, the mower starts, cuts, and gets put away, and nothing happens. No call to the shop. No $2,200 conversation about a transaxle on a machine that isn't worth it. Just an ordinary afternoon that costs you nothing. That's the whole prize, and it's a quiet one. The bill that doesn't arrive is the only kind you never get to feel good about paying. Now, I know exactly who's about to disagree with me, because I left your brand off the list. The Ferris guys have the strongest case, and they know it. The Deere people are going to tell me about their dealer, and honestly, they may be right about their dealer. The bad boy owners are going to tell me about steel thickness. Good. Bring it, but bring the hours. Tell me the machine. Tell me what's on the hour meter. Tell me what's failed and what it cost you. Because a number on a meter beats a paragraph of loyalty every time, and I'll happily be corrected by one. And if you're the person standing at a counter this weekend about to sign for something in the $6,000 range, ask for the warranty document before you ask for the discount. Read the hour limit out loud. Watch what happens. If this was useful, subscribe. I'm going to keep pulling on this thread. There's one I deliberately left alone today, which is what actually happens to a mower's resale value between 800 and 1,200 hours. Because I've watched 2 nearly identical machines with nearly identical meters sell $1,800 apart, and I still can't fully explain the gap. I've got a theory. I don't have proof yet. Until then, read the part number, not the paint. Take care of yourselves.